How you guys all doing in Coos County? That was lame. Try again. How you guys all doing in Coos County? Yeah, alright. So, every time I'm invited out to speak, it's such an honor to be able to do this and to be able to go out and to groups of people like this and to see people like yourselves standing up for their liberties, standing up for their rights. And I'd like to acknowledge people who are able to bring me in. First of all, Shane Osborne, I can say his name right. First of all, Shane Osborne, my Oregon State team leader for PANDA, People Against the NDAA, has been doing an excellent job out here in Oregon. He is one of the main architects, along with Tom McCorgan from Oath Keepers, of this coalition to protect our rights. Let's give a big round of applause to both these gentlemen here. Excellent. As you may have heard, my name is Dan Johnson. I am 20 years old, and I'm the founder and national director of PANDA, People Against the NDAA. I never really wanted to get involved in politics. My view of politics centers around the idea that poly is many and ticks being blood-sucking creatures. and so politics was never really an avenue that I wanted to express myself in. And I started paying attention when I realized that it affects every part of our lives. It affects everything we do. It affects how much things cost. It affects where we go. It affects where we can or cannot, what we can and cannot do. And I wanted to get involved with it after I got out of college. That was the goal. Just get college out of the way, do an internship somewhere, maybe state representative, and work my way up the ladder. The standard way that many politicians end up doing it. And I was stumbling around on the internet. Maybe many of the younger groups in the audience will note that Stumble Upon is the greatest procrastination tool in the history of existence. And I was procrastinating a test. And so I ran across a video called 63 Senators Betrayed You Today. And I remember sitting there going, 63 senators betrayed me today? How? And so I watched the video. And that was my introduction to the National Defense Authorization Act. And I'm watching this video and I'm watching Senator Lindsey Graham stand on the floor and say, shut up. You don't get a lawyer. That the world is the battlefield, including the homeland. And that if you're an American citizen and you're thinking about helping Al-Qaeda, you have three things coming your way. And I'm quoting, death, detention, and prosecution. And I'm watching this video go on. And I'm thinking back, and I was lucky enough to be homeschooled. My parents kept me out of the public schools, or as I call them, public indoctrination centers. And being homeschooled, I was able to go to the library. We had a Super Nintendo as far as video games are concerned, not exactly high tech. No, the library was more interesting to me. And so I took out videos on World War II, took out videos on Nazi Germany, took out videos on Imperial Japan, and how did they treat their citizens, and what led to those conflicts, and how did those conflicts progress, and why. And I remember the video tying the acts in Nazi Germany a few years before Hitler went to war in Poland, and the NDAA and Patriot Act today. Remember the Reichstag fire decree lined up against the parts of the Weimar German Constitution that it violated, and then showing the NDAA and Patriot Act put together, and it's the exact same sections. I remember seeing that and literally falling out of my chair like, what happened to my country? So I was brought up to believe that America was the land of the free and home of the brave. And if that's so, then why are we following Nazi Germany? So that was my entrance into this fight against the NDAA. I didn't know what to do. I did about a month and a half of research to make sure I knew what I was going into. And eventually decided, not long after it signed the law on New Year's Eve, that I had to fight it. I could not sit back and watch my country deteriorate, because I know what happens when it does. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And so there's always that person in your life that you can point to and say, you told me I couldn't do it, and you're the catalyst for why I did. I organized 21 students on Bowling Green State University's campus to go down to our local city council and to present a resolution to them, much like Shane has done and much like many of you have done here, and to present a resolution to them on the NDAA, because I figured that if we bring this up to them, they're going to see it, they're going to realize this is horrible, and they're going to stand up for our rights and for our liberties. I didn't think it was that hard. I didn't think it was that big of an issue. They always talk to our generation about, get involved in politics, go out there, make your voice heard. And so with the support of the local newspaper, with a TV spot that had already aired on us, went to our local city council, we packed the room. There was no room, standing room only, there was people outside. And the response we got was, and I quote, "These students should have taken Government 160. They don't know the inner workings of our national government, and it's up to us in some respects to educate them." Otherwise known as no. Well, to my mayor, Bowling Green, that was the catalyst, and PANDA is now the largest organization in the nation fighting the NDAA, with battle in over 22 states alone today and 36 state teams nationwide. And because of people like Shane, people like Tom all around the country, this is happening. This town hall is happening all across the country. I just did one not too long ago in Boston, Massachusetts, been going anywhere that they'll take me and put me up somewhere and give me a tent or something. All right, so I'm going to go into the nitty-gritty of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2012. I'm going to go into what is it, how is it bad, does it apply to American citizens, and does that matter? Does the NDAA undermine your constitutional rights, and what can and should you do about it? So we can play a little quick video as an intro. I believe you got it.
Earlier this week, the President signed the National Defense Authorization Act.
A radical new claim of presidential power.
It gives the military the power to indefinitely detain American citizens, suspected, not convicted, of some sort of involvement or affiliation with terrorism.
A bill that allows U.S. citizens to be transported overseas to prisons and held there without charges filed.
Senators John McCain and Carl Levin are looking to make America into a military state and give the president the power to be judge, jury, and executioner.
When President Obama signed the NDAA, sections of the bill were opposed by key members of his administration. Many civil liberties activists believe the law is unconstitutional.
What this bill does is it takes a wrecking ball to the United States Constitution.
It explicitly says that he has the authority to target American citizens because he believes they're bad people.
The government is claiming the power under the Afghanistan Authorization for Use of Military Force as a justification for entering American homes to grab people, indefinitely detain them, and not give them a charge in a trial.
Individual, no matter who they are, if they pose a threat to the security of the United States of America, should not be allowed to continue that threat.
And when they say, "I want my lawyer," you tell them, "Shut up. Your time to get a lawyer. You're an enemy from that."
There may be a number of people who cannot be prosecuted for past crimes. In some cases because evidence may be tainted. But who nonetheless pose a threat to the security of the United States.
There's one thing and one thing only that is protecting American citizens, and that's our Constitution. Is a baseball stadium more important than liberty, or a liquor license is more important than due process?
Please know what will come your way. Death, detention, prosecution.
It is time to stand, to peacefully bring about a revolution.
One day, somebody's going to have to say enough.
All right, so jumping right into the NDAA, if somebody wants to flick the lights back on a little bit. It has been passed for, actually 51 years, I've got to update this. It's been passed for 51 years by Congress. And it usually just authorizes funding for our military and our defense policies. That's great, that's fine. But hidden inside the 2012 NDAA are sections 1021 and 1022. And in a nutshell, they authorize the indefinite military detention of American citizens and any person without a charge and without a trial. It passed 283 to 136 in the House and 93 to 7 in the Senate. Bipartisan if there ever was one. So it takes its authority from the 2001 Authorization for Use of Military Force. The NDAA was signed into law by Obama. The 2001 AUMF was signed into law by President George W. Bush. Here's the language from the AUMF. In general, that the President is authorized to use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11th, 2001, or harbored such organizations or persons, essentially to stop terror. So the AUMF set up a national defense policy that was tied directly to punishing those criminals who engaged in the attacks of 9/11. It was tied specifically to a past event, or retroactive, as our justice system should be. It was also tied directly to 9/11. So even though it started chipping away, it opened Pandora's box, as you will, started chipping away at the standards, it still was tied directly to a past event. They could have just claimed you were going to commit a crime in the future. Anyone seen Minority Report? Tom Cruise's Minority Report is a movie I highly recommend all of you watch. Tom Cruise plays the part of a police officer who is ordered to engage in pre-crime. There are scenes all over the walls of people who are about ready to commit a crime. And the job of this unit is to go and detain this person before they commit the crime. What Tom slowly figures out is that the people he's detaining were never actually going to commit a crime, but were political enemies of the current regime. And that's why he was asked to detain them. Our justice system must be retroactive. However, even though the AUMF covered these, planned, authorized, committed, aided, or harbored, it's much more specific than you'll see the NDAA. The NDAA expands that authority. So section 1021b2, a person who is a part of or substantially supported Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or associated forces that are engaged in hostilities against the United States or its coalition partners. So you go scream about Germany's recent policy, or you go to Germany to help them protest the Germany spying on their own people. They're a coalition partner of the United States, including any person who's committed a belligerent act. Can anyone in this room define a belligerent act for me? Or someone who has directly supported such hostilities to aid of such enemy forces. Directly supported could mean something as little as you gave money. There's actually, I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, which happens to be the place of one of the only 3 charities in the United States to be directly linked with Al-Qaeda. Kind Hearts was a charity in downtown Toledo, Ohio, that was actually funneling all the dollars they got directly to Al-Qaeda forces. And anybody who donated to Kind Hearts, not knowing that, had directly supported Al-Qaeda forces without even knowing they were. And could, had the NDAA been passed by that, before this was shut down around 2007, 2009, had the NDAA already been passed, could have been taken under this law. So here's the difference. Now, one of the key arguments that politicians will like to make, especially if something that they're playing with fire, because if they tell the American people about this, they're really not going to get away with it. It's kind of hard to lie too much about. The text is right there in plain sight. And so one of the things that a politician or any member, I'm sure some of your representatives in Oregon voted for this, I believe. Not your senators, but I'm sure some of your representatives in Oregon voted for this. So if you confront them on this, the first argument they'll say is, well, it didn't do anything new. We just codified the AUMF. Well, first of all, as Judge Catherine Forrest put it, and I'm supposed to believe that in spite of the fact that Congress usually passes laws for a reason? Here's the difference. AUMF and NDAA 1021b1. So there's a section in the NDAA where they essentially copy the AUMF and put it in there. Is what we've talked about before. 1021b2, however, expands it to anyone who's a part of or supported TAQ, or Taliban, Al-Qaeda, associated forces, that are engaged in hostilities against the United States or its coalition partners, who commits a belligerent act or directly supports those hostilities. So, The NDAA changes the current national security policy in a few ways. Number one, it increases the targeting profile. No longer are we tied to a past event. Now if you commit a belligerent act, which, by the way, if a belligerent act was a crime, there'd be no reason for them to put it in here. They just name the crime. But a belligerent act's not a crime. It's not a crime to be belligerent, yet. So it increases the targeting profile beyond the AUMF to include anyone. AUMF used to, or was originally designed to include only non-citizens. This includes citizens now. It expands the countries being protected, expands the time frame, and it goes from a policy of retribution, or a policy of we're getting someone back for an act they've committed in the past, to a policy for a war on terror. So, what is terrorism? Terrorism is an idea or a method. And just like any idea or a method, it's very hard to legislate out of existence. If, for example, Congress tried to legislate that you can no longer clap with your right hand on top. You must clap with your left hand on top. I guarantee you there'll be people across the country who still clap with their right hand on top. You cannot legislate a method or an idea. Let's say we legislate the color blue. The color blue is illegal in the United States. It is now illegal to wear blue, or to have blue anywhere. You cannot get rid of an idea like that. You cannot even get rid of a thought. They try to legislate thought out of existence. You can't do that. And so getting rid of the idea of terrorizing someone, I have had friends jump out from behind doors and scare the living daylights out of me. I would consider that at some point terrorism, but this term is just a method. And number two, it's really not a very popular one. So first of all, going back to a quick recap on some of the history of terrorism, I'm not sure if it existed before this point, but in 1738, the British government published a list of the top 10 things they were concerned about. 1738. One of those things was terrorism. If one of those things was terrorism, who were the terrorists 30 years later? The colonists, the American revolutionaries. And it's really not a very popular one. Here's some of the ways that you're more likely to die than a terrorist attack. Do you have that picture? Okay, we'll go back. I have a picture of a different presentation. Anyway, you're more likely to die getting struck by lightning twice than being killed in a terrorist attack. Sadly, you are 8 times more likely to be killed by a police officer as an innocent in the line of duty than die in a terrorist attack. You're more likely to die of heat stroke than a terrorist attack. You are 17,000 times more likely to die of heart disease than a terrorist attack. And yet, you don't see the news blaring about how we need to pass laws against heart disease, how we need to pour trillions of dollars into research to get rid of heart disease, which they could have easily taken from the war on terror, heart disease, and saved 17,800 more lives every year. But they don't. So, Judge Catherine Forrest heard this case, and there was a group called the Freedom Seven. It was Chris Hedges and several other people joined him in a lawsuit against the Obama administration on the NDAA. As you may know, Chris Hedges, famous New York Times reporter, got kicked out of the newspaper for printing a little bit too much truth. And Judge Catherine Forrest hears this case. So she's listening to them, and she's asking the government. She at first is assuming that this law is constitutional. Just assuming the government's right. That why would they pass a law so blatantly violating our rights? And so she starts asking the government questions. Can you define a belligerent act? Well, we haven't really thought about that. That is exactly what their answer was. Can you define substantial or direct support? We'll have to refer to the laws of war. Go ahead. Well, yeah. We can't tell you that. And she even laid out a specific scenario in front of them. She said, okay, someone writes a book. It's a fiction book. So there's nothing true in it. It's just a fiction novel. Someone writes a fiction novel, And in the front cover of that fiction novel, they put the words, "I support the political goals of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Could this person be indefinitely detained?" The government goes, we don't know. Over and over again throughout this trial, they continually answered her questions with, "Hey, we don't know." And so she said the government was unable to define precisely what direct or substantial support means. Thus, an individual could run the risk of substantially supporting or directly supporting an associated force without even being aware that he or she was doing so. This measure has a chilling impact on First Amendment rights. There's a binder back there if you want to check it out after the presentation is over. And there'll be a Q&A right after this, by the way. Ask any questions you'd like. There's a binder back there that has the actual text of her opinions. All of the opinions on the case are right there. But one of the things she also said, a law cannot be vague when possible indefinite detention is on the line for misinterpreting it. And so she struck it down. She said no NDAA. This was later overturned. But the 2012 NDAA does not define these terms. They are vague all the way through. And Thomas Jefferson said, "Let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down with the chains of the Constitution." There cannot be vague language in something like, especially if you see vague language in a law that you're looking at or a bill that you're following, that's a key indication they don't want you to know what they're writing. And so since a belligerent or terrorist act is not defined in the NDAA, we have to look to the government to define it for us. So how do they define a belligerent act? Let's take a look. Okay. Has anybody ever seen one of these before? Okay, a few people. This is from the FBI and Bureau of Justice Assistance Communities Against Terrorism Initiative. This initiative is, for every business owner in your town who starts up a new business or currently owning one, they get one of these flyers pertaining to their business, depending on what it is. On our website, pandaunite.org, we have several of these flyers. We have 30 of them listed for different business types. And they all have interesting ones, but this is one of my personal favorites. So what should you call the FBI on and consider someone a terrorist for? Anyone who demands identity privacy. Don't want to give up your ID? The FBI will come over and force you to. Insist on paying with cash. Significantly alters their appearance from visit to visit. Has a missing hand or fingers. Chemical burns. Strange odors. I asked this question, I surveyed about 150 students, asked this question, the only answer that nobody came up with one except for one student, she said onions. I guess that's close enough. Or brightly colored stains on clothing. So you know your kid's eating his hot dog and he spills ketchup and mustard on his clothes and they call the FBI and say he's a terrorist. If you make racist or extreme religious comments or statements coupled with comments that are violent or appear to condone violence. What's the problem with an appearance? It's in the eye of the beholder. Exactly. So I can say I'm going to pick up this table and throw it at the audience, but none of you really believe I'm going to do that. Now, if someone out there hears I'm picking up the table and throwing it in the audience, they might interpret that as a violent statement, and then call the FBI on me, in which case I'll have to apologize and pause the presentation for a while. Makes suspicious comments regarding anti-US. What is an anti-US comment? Is it I want my government to be constrained in its constitutional bounds? Is that an anti-US comment? Is an anti-US comment saying that I believe that the drone strikes that have killed over 3,000 civilians overseas are making enemies? Is that an anti-US comment? What is an anti-US comment? What other countries have punished people or asked citizens to report people who made anti-regime comments? Communist China, Germany, North Korea, Syria, Egypt, Soviet Union. Run down Pol Pot's Cambodia, North Vietnam. Run down the list. Not exactly countries we want to be in a party with.
The U.S. with the Sedition Act.
The U.S. with the Sedition Acts, absolutely. Radical theology. Vague or cryptic warnings that suggest or appear to endorse the use of violence in a cause. This is my favorite. What's the problem with a vague or cryptic warning? It's vague or cryptic. You're not supposed to get it. Okay, so let's see what else they've come up with. This is perhaps one of the most direct documents that says exactly where they're taking this term terrorist. Anyone who is nationalistic, as opposed to universal or national orientation, anti-global, suspicious of centralized federal authority. Reverent of individual liberty, and believe in conspiracy theories that involve grave threat to national sovereignty and or personal liberty. Is anyone familiar when with when the term conspiracy theory was popularized in the United States? Richard Nixon called the people who said he was involved in the Watergate scandal conspiracy theorists. Because he's not a crook. Exactly. And so, since when did reverence become a crime in the United States? Since when did revering or thinking highly of something become a crime and something we need to be reported on in the United States? This was published 31 days after the NDAA was signed into law. Or single issue. Groups or individuals that obsessively focus on very specifically or narrowly defined causes. PANDA is an official terrorist organization, according to this document here. So what else?
Does that mean anti-abortion means all religion is a terrorist organization?
Anything is a terrorist organization. Okay, so this was interesting. This was published in Time magazine. It was called Police Discuss Terrorism at the White House. It was also promptly pulled from the internet. I learned my lesson, now I save things to my computer. This is a screenshot taken from when Fox News reported on this. Warning signs for police. People likely to commit violence speak against their government. They blame the government for their perceived problems. So number one, remember folks, all your problems are in your head, they're perceived. You lead perfect lives. And number two, if you blame the government for any of those, you're a possible terrorist. Unusual or extreme actions that catch the attention of others. Or active online to show extreme views / connect with others. That means or. Ever sent an email? Oh, 2 people have sent an email? Ever sent an email? Okay. Is there anything else? There was one more slide that I have in a different presentation. The Combating Terrorism Center at West Point released a study. And it was called Challengers from the Sidelines, Understanding the Radical Right. Where it called, and I quote, anti-federalists terrorists. If there's a clearer definition of where our government is taking the word terrorist, and how they're not using the NSA to spy on people in other countries, how they're not using all these programs to go after people we think are bad, how they're using these programs to go after you and me, it's their use of the term anti-federalist. It's not a term you see around often. There's not an anti-federalist party tomorrow. It's not a term you see on the street. It's only a term used when people are talking about their constitutional rights. The anti-federalists wrote the Bill of Rights. It's only a term used in that sense. They're not targeting other people, they're targeting you and me. They're targeting anyone who would challenge the power structure of our country. So let's dive back into the language. Does it apply to American citizens, and does it matter? First of all, does it matter?
Yep.
No. The Bill of Rights never once mentions the word citizen. You will never find the word citizen in the Bill of Rights. Why? Because to put the word citizen as a qualification for receiving your rights would mean your rights were granted from government and not inalienable. It could be taken by that government. So it doesn't matter if it applies to an American citizen, because by applying to anyone, all they have to do is say, well, you're not an American citizen. Oh, wait, you think you have rights? What if you walk into court and they say, illegal aliens don't have rights? What if you walk into court and they call you an illegal alien? And this is from, this lesson I received on this is from Jeff Lewis, who not only leads the Patriot Coalition, helps out with a resolution, but also leads FIRE, the largest anti-illegal immigration group in the country. He said, illegal immigrants must have rights. Why? Because if you walk into court and all the judge has to do is say, you're an illegal immigrant, you present your papers, but those are faked. Those are forged. And you say, well, I'm a citizen. They say, no, you're not. Your rights can be stripped from you in front of your eyes in that courtroom. It's not what the Founding Fathers intended for this country. So it doesn't matter whether it applies to American citizens, but to satisfy the rest of the world who doesn't know that little tidbit, here's how it does. The requirement in paragraph 1 shall apply to any person whose detention is authorized under section 21, who's determined. Okay, what is this requirement they're talking about? Section 1022A1. Custody pending disposition under law of war. In general, as provided in paragraph, except as provided in paragraph 4, which we'll go into, the armed forces of the United States, it's not the FBI, it's not your local police, it's not your sheriff. The armed forces of the United States shall hold a person in paragraph 2, we just talked about, belligerent act, who is captured in the course of hostilities authorized by the AUMF in military custody pending disposition under the law of war. This is not your local police hauling you off to the county jail. This is the military hauling you off to an Air Force base, to a military base, to an army camp.
That's war on us.
That's war on us.
Holy cow.
Exactly. So shall hold means must hold. There's no way around it. Shall hold means must hold. Period. End of story. So this is a section added by Senator Dianne Feinstein. Now some of you may chuckle at that name. The requirement to detain a person in military custody under this section does not extend to citizens of the United States. Now this, at a quick glance, seems to exclude American citizens entirely from this law. But it doesn't. Why? If you tell your brother, or your sister, or a friend, you're not required to wear a coat today when we go to the store. Could they still wear a coat? Absolutely. They could wear his full snowboarding uniform and snowboard into Walmart. This does not remove their option. It only removes the requirement. And so now the United States military has the option, which makes it a lot easier to enforce the law, of course. Because if they all of a sudden were required to detain every citizen in the country who commits a belligerent act, hey, I wouldn't be speaking here, that's for sure. There'd be so much opposition to a mass roundup of citizens, they would never be able to use it. But if they have the option to use it, they've created what's called a two-track court system. One track of the court system is civil law. They had this in Nazi Germany. One track of the court system was civil law. If you got picked up off the street for a minor infraction in Germany, let's say the commander tells his sergeant, pick someone off the street for this, and they pick you up off the street. And the commander realizes that that's his general's buddy, then that person can get their constitutional rights. Be released back in a day. But if that person was a dissenter against the regime, or a political activist they didn't like, they put them on the military track. They were given the option to put them on the military track. There have only been a few military tribunals in the United States of American citizens. Most of them ended in execution. German Americans and Northerners under Lincoln. It's not a very fair, it's not a just system. Often your fate is decided before you even go in. So this creates a two-track court system by allowing the military the option to detain you and not requiring them to. Very simple. Non-citizens they shall hold, U.S. citizens they may hold. This was later modified by policy directives, so they may hold non-citizens. They may hold both. Does the Constitution authorize the President to have that kind of power? Absolutely not. And if you hold your questions for just to the end of the presentation, I'll be more than happy to answer them. I'd like to just take Q&A right at the end. So, does it undermine your constitutional rights? Yes, here's a short list. Article 1, Section 9, Suspension Clause, suspending habeas corpus. Article 3, Section 2, Grand Jury Indictment. You're not getting a trial, you're not getting a grand jury. Article 3, Section 3, Treason. This is interesting. How many of you heard when Admiral al-Awlaki was being lambasted by mainstream media that he was guilty of treason? How many of you heard Admiral al-Awlaki was guilty of treason? A couple of you. Well, our Constitution only defines the requirements for one crime, and that's treason. And there's a reason for that. Being called a traitor is possibly one of the worst things you can be called. And often comes with the worst punishments. And so our Constitution requires someone who rises up against their government and is guilty of treason to be tried and to either openly confess in court or have two witnesses confess against him. If they can just pick you up off the street, if they can assassinate you with a drone strike because they accuse you of treason, we're violating the treason clause of our Constitution, which has served us well over and over and over again. Yet we're completely ignoring it. First Amendment, free speech. If you're a journalist and you hang out with me for a day, let's say I'm on the suspected terrorist watch list. I probably already am, but let's say I'm on there. You hang out with me for a day, and then you have to write a story about it. Are you going to be more likely to write a positive story or a negative story about me if you know you can be indefinitely detained without a charge, without a trial, for writing a positive story and substantially supporting a terrorist threat? Chills free speech. Second Amendment, right to bear arms. The terrorist watch list handbooks that that the FBI hands out, list people who own multiple guns, as if owning the weapons themselves is a terrorist incident. The people who own multiple guns, people who have weatherproof ammunition, all of that as a possible terrorist. Fourth Amendment, to be securing your persons and papers. Obviously, if they're seizing you, you're not securing pretty much anything. Fifth Amendment of due process. Sixth Amendment, speedy and public trial. Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. Also in the NDAA, they can take you to a foreign country. Any foreign country, in fact. And torture you, get rid of you, put you there forever. Doesn't matter. But they can get rid of you. And that violates cruel and unusual punishment. But even though, it gets better, folks. Even though the NDAA directly violates at least 6 amendments of the Bill of Rights, that is not the most dangerous part of the law. It took me a while to come around to this, and it took me a while to figure out what was going on here. But the most dangerous part of the NDAA is hidden in that requirement to detain we just talked about. Let's read it again. The armed forces of the United States shall hold a person described in paragraph 2 who is captured in the course of hostilities authorized by the AUMF in military custody pending disposition under the law of war. Now, what is the law of war? The law of war governs what countries can and cannot do in wartime. It's usually international law. The law of war starts Geneva Conventions. So in Geneva Conventions, they create the law of war. supposed to make war more humane. And they designated two classes of people within the original Geneva Convention laws of war. So combatants, people who take up arms, and non-combatants, people who don't. Seems fairly simple. However, in 2001, when the United States wanted to torture the 9/11 hijackers, they created a new category out of thin air. They called it unlawful enemy combatants. Now, this is what they used to torture the hijackers. But in 2009, the Council on Foreign Relations, not a friend of liberty, for any paying attention to them, the Council on Foreign Relations got together and decided, you know, that's a bit too harsh of a term, because it only allows us to take from the combatant category and torture them and remove them from the protections of the laws of war. We can't take from the non-combatant category. And so they renamed it unprivileged enemy belligerent. Which, number one, implies that your rights are a privilege. And number two, they used it to kill Anwar al-Awlaki and his 16-year-old son in Yemen. And two other individuals who they just came out and said they did. And probably many more who they haven't claimed they've killed. It was created to torture. It was used to execute. Why do you think they used the term belligerent act in the NDAA? U.S. citizens are now placed in this category. We are now placed in this category. America is now placed under the law of war that was created by the United States to torture and used by the United States to execute. That is a dangerous prospect. You talk about the homeland being the battlefield. It's the battlefield because we apply the law of war to it. The NDAA does not need to violate any more of the Constitution directly. It essentially removes it by placing us under the law of war. None of the provisions in the Constitution are worth anything if the law of war is in effect. That's why this is so dangerous. That's why this is the line in the sand. That's why this is the point where we cannot compromise anymore. We've compromised so much to get to this point. And when they declare America a battlefield, who watched the police reaction and the military reaction in the Boston Marathon bombing incident? But pay attention. Good. The Atlantic stated that 9,000 law enforcement supported the military, not the other way around. The military took the lead. And house-to-house searches in Watertown, Massachusetts. My Massachusetts team was due to meet in Watertown that day. I flew out of there 5 hours before the bombs blew up the marathon. The law of war was used in Watertown, Massachusetts that day. And what happened? You see video online of people being dragged from their homes. You see testimony after testimony over and over again of people being taken and slammed on the ground. Reporters being taken and slammed on the ground and searched. Over and over and over again. This is what the law of war does to a country. The United States instituted nationwide the law of war twice. Once during the Civil War under Lincoln. We detained 15,000 Northerners. Not Southerners. Northerners. And executed several of them. The other time was during World War II. Executive Order 9066 says the military shall be given certain jurisdiction over certain areas of the United States. It says nothing about detention. And we detained 110,000 Japanese Americans with no due process and no trial, simply because we thought they were scary. They've taken the U.S. Constitution, the supreme law of the land, and allowed it to be replaced with the law of war. And you talk about, I've heard it over and over again, talked about a line in the sand. Talk about a camel peeking its nose out from under the tent and smacking that camel's nose and hitting it back into the tent. And I've heard over and over again as we've fought the NDAA nationwide that, well, we have to compromise. We can only get so much done. The states can only say, well, hands off, we're going to put our hands in our pockets and let the federal government do what they wish. We have no power, we have no power, we have no power. If you don't draw the line when the military can come in your house and indefinitely detain you, where do you draw that line? Is there any other place to draw that line? I don't think so. And that's why I do this. That's why I fly around the country. That's why I spend 16 to 18 hours on this every day. Is because I know there's no other place to draw that line. And one day, I want to be able to look into the eyes of someone who hasn't lost their innocence yet. Maybe 3, maybe a 4-year-old, maybe a 6-year-old. I want to be able to look into their eyes and tell them you're free. And mean it. And believe it. I want to be able to look in their eyes and say that the 1 million soldiers who shed their blood on foreign soil for our liberties and our freedoms were honored. You know, Mary, you made a great quote earlier. Talk about the tomb of the unknown soldier. Would the soldier ask us why? Why did they fight? Why did they die? If we were to become the same Nazi Germany they fought against. And I cannot bear to live with myself if I don't fight it. I don't know about any of you. I don't know if you came here because you were dragged here by a friend. I don't know if you came here because you were interested in the topic. I don't know if you came here because you were already fighting. I don't know. All I know is I cannot allow this to happen to my country. I won't let it happen to my country. During the Revolutionary War, 3% of the country fought. 3%. It's talked about nationwide that, oh, we need a majority. We need a majority to take our rights back. We need a majority to take our liberties back. We've got to become the majority. We've got to wake other people up. No, we have to engage the people we already have because it only took 3% to win the American Revolution. What I see in this room today are the 3%. I'm not advocating violence. Because if we advocate violence, we only lose. We did not fire the first shot in the Revolutionary War. We will not fire a shot in this one. However, where do we draw that line? Are we the 3% that draws our line in the sand and says enough? Remember, during the Revolutionary War, 1/3 of the country were loyalists. They would have reported the Founding Fathers to the British had they seen them. 1/3 of the country. It only took 3%. A small, tireless minority igniting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men, as Samuel Adams put it. Today we are the 3%. It only takes 3%. And the window of opportunity is closing fast. I'm not saying this to scare you. I didn't come here to freak you out. I came here to tell you that we need soldiers in this intellectual fight. We need people across the country who are willing to say, this is my line in the sand. Constitutional lawyer Chris Ann Hall was speaking at the Constitutional Sheriff's Convention, which I had the opportunity and they were grateful enough to allow me to speak at. And she said, she put up a picture of her son. And she said, this is the reason I fight. This is the reason she speaks for free. She goes around the country speaking for free. This is the reason I fight. Because if I don't sacrifice something now, my children will pay for it with their blood. It's a sobering thought. I wish I came to give pat on the backs and patty cakes to everyone in the room. But I came because I'm a part of the revolution. I'm part of the 3%. And I'm asking every one of you to also be a part of that 3%. There are sign-up forms in the back for PANDA Oregon if you want to join. There are also, we're launching a charter member program. We've run on $1,500 for the past year and a half. I'm impressed with myself on that one. The charter member program will allow us to start bringing money in the organization. Not everyone has to sign up. I'm not asking you to. But if you can contribute to that program to start to launch us to be able to start reaching out to people through advertisements, through TV ads, things like that, that will really help us get along the way. And like I said, there's other documents, there's other things back there, and Shane is going to give you an update on what's going on in PANDA, Oregon, but I want you all to think about what was said today. And really think about it, really understand what's going on. And after Shane's done, we'll have a Q&A for any questions you had throughout my presentation. But I want you guys to really think about as individuals what this fight means to us and where your line in the sand will be drawn. Thank you.
Okay. Questions? Anybody has questions that you want anybody to answer? Yes.
You know, with all this, you're guilty, stuff I guilt with. How come this shooter at Fort Hood who killed 14 people is going to trial? How come he isn't treated as a terrorist? Politics.
Yeah, I
know he's Obama's buddy.
Wasn't he active duty at the time?
Yes,
Yes,
I'm not too familiar with the issue, no.
Yeah.
They protect their own no matter what they've done.
I can answer this question. See, the government is prepared to take over the country. So every one of us is a potential resistor to their mind. So the way that they have the laws written is because we're potential enemies against them because we would stand for our rights and they want to take them. As simple as that.
You talk about the two-track court system, and since he was active duty, he should be in a military trial. That is the only exception. When you enter the military, that's why we have military tribunals in the first place. You get court-martialed if you do something wrong in the military. You don't go to civil court. So with regards to that, he should have a military trial. I cringe at the thought of calling him a terrorist because that word can be so easily used on anyone else for any reason. All terrorists are criminals who the government has a special reason to call them a terrorist.
The thing is, with the military tribunal, you can go in there, but you can only plead guilty. You can't plead not guilty or no contest. And they decide what they're going to do to you because you're under military rule at that point.
Anybody got any questions?
I would like to know what's the current status of the Posse Comitatus Act. Is it standing?
The Act is not in effect anymore. It was enacted in 1878 in July because of the Southern Reconstruction of the period when they had federal troops policing the South, those 11 states, and the military governors, and they were tired of being railroaded, so that's why they passed that Posse Comitatus to get the federal troops out of the South. And then the authorization for use of military force negated that, the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act. So this trumped it. It no longer exists in our country.
What trumped it? The NDAA?
The AUMF, the authorization for military
why do you guys
force.
go after that then?
Well, this is just a start. We've got to start somewhere with it. So we're working our way back on it.
Just to further on that, while we don't tackle AUMF, our legislation tackles AUMF as well. We're not going directly after AUMF because you saw the fairly specific language in there.
Yeah.
That was originally designed for non-citizens outside of U.S. soil. So it didn't cover U.S. soil, didn't cover non-citizens. It's just been interpreted to. And so there's just a big difference between being interpreted to and actually doing it. We want to go after the thing that actually does it, and then just in case, cover any interpretation possible to make sure that we're blocking it all.
So it no longer exists?
The Posse Comitatus Act exists in law, but it's like they've taken loopholes and punched it so many times that it's just like a set.
Right. They've reintroduced, they basically take it away, reintroduced military force to the civilians, basically.
Okay.
Any other questions? Rick?
Yeah, just to clarify something, not all military tribunals fall under UCMJ. They came up with special rules for enemy combatants, and they can come up with special rules for unprivileged belligerents. That's a new term to me. So it's worse than UCMJ.
Yeah, they can call it anything they want. The bottom line is it affects American citizens as an awful lot of aliens, and we can't allow it. And someone else had a question, ma'am?
So you said that it was overturned at some point, and it was kind of overturned?
It was initially overturned by Judge Forrest,
Right.
Catherine Forrest, and then she put a stop on it. Obama's attorneys went over the next day, and they asked for a stay on it so they can continue using it, and so that's what they're doing now.
That's what they're doing
Yeah,
now?
exactly. So they're ignoring the judge's ruling.
And by the way, this is a law that the president claimed they would never have to use.
Right. I mean, you've got a Supreme Court that's allowing swabbing of cheeks of people who have not been convicted of anything yet. Then you've got a problem with the Fourth Amendment. So, okay.
This is not so much a question, but while you're in Oregon, if you have the time, we actually have one of the civilian concentration camps down at Town Falls. You can actually drive out. If anybody ever gets a business card of me, the picture that I hand out is actually of those buildings. Not so much because of the buildings, I like the picture, but I've actually visited one of those camps, and we have them in Oregon. So
Right. There's so much involved in this.
Down by
people
Clever
start
Falls.
looking.
It's in the state park, I believe.
What we want to make clear is we're not a bunch of conspiracy theorists because, number one, we're not theorists. This is fact. It's all within the law. It's all, you can look it up yourself. Every bit of it is confirmable. We didn't make this up. The NDAA is nothing short than an act of war against the American people, period. That's exactly what it is. When you get picked up for using your First Amendment right for over 237 years, this is what we've been using to protect us, something's wrong. And it's not us. So it's the people who we've elected. We've allowed this because of two things: political correctness and apathy. Two things. That's harmful. Because we're distracted from everything else. All these other different topics. You know, look at this this incident with the kid that got killed by the Zimmerman guy, whatever. Everything takes up the airwaves. I haven't watched regular TV in 7 years, and I'm happy about it. I get my news from the internet, reliable sites, and I get it where it's double-checked, triple-checked, where you can find it on the government sites, and that's what I use for my information. Double and triple check it. Put your BS filters on and look for those little dots and start connecting them, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. Matter of fact, if you delve into it, you'll even see more than you learned tonight. Now, the National Defense Resources Preparedness Act and the Civilian National Security Force are other ones. We won't talk about that tonight, but it is so devious. That's what the problems are. So start digging into it.
And I'll also kind of piggyback on that. As people who are going to be fighting for liberty and against the NDAA, or at least I hope you will be, as people who are going to be taking up this fight, one thing to remember is read the legislation. Read the actual law, what they're telling you exists. Alaska, Virginia, Hawaii, Rhode Island, all claimed that they passed a law against the NDAA. Not a single one of those laws does anything to protect the people. That's why they're blue and not red in that map that we just showed. So it's very, very important. Read the legislation and don't back down. Again, line in the sand. We don't compromise on this one. And back.
I just wanted to, it's not a question, but you're talking about drawing the line in the sand. I've got, I'm an Iraqi vet myself, came back and the system was fighting it. I've worked with Mr. Stagenborg as a veteran advocate and accredited veteran service rep. The thing is, what was appalling to me that the average citizen doesn't look at when you talk about veterans and you talk about what they want to brand as a terrorist. The line in the sand is very, very real, and it has to happen, and it's very important for the simple fact like you were saying, your son went over there, did 2 tours. You know, I did a tour. All of the people that are going over to Iraq and Afghanistan, as Nancy Pelosi stated, and Janet Napolitano both, and being backed up by Dianne Feinstein. So yes, unfortunately, I know those names. Where they come out and said, if you're a veteran coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan, you are considered the same list as a right-wing extremist. Now, myself as a veteran who took an oath to protect the Constitution of the United States against terrorists, foreign and domestic, to preserve the way of life for my country's citizens and my fellow brothers and sisters in arms, I take great offense to that. So as we veterans come back and we try to just get back into a place of normalcy, our normalcy is gone, because while we were gone, those were taken away. And so we bear the burdens of a lack of diplomacy by the government of the United States and by the people. And so, in essence, everything that we have borne, the atrocities sometimes we have had to perform, stay with us for the rest of our lives. And as we try to come back and be welcomed by the average individual within our communities, and people don't understand us, not only are they not understanding us and kind of pushing us out there, calling us, you guys are a little crazy, but at the same token, we're being told by members of the Congress that make the laws to protect the people and we put in office to protect our way of life, that we are now considered right-wing extremists and watch list personnel as potential terrorists against we are considered a threat to national security. I hate to tell you this, and I'm going to use a few adjectives, that's horseshit. Because we took an oath to protect the Constitution and the people that live within the bounds of the United States. We took it, we paid for it, we continue to pay for it, and we take that oath to the grave. I don't know one that doesn't. The bottom line of this is, if we don't have it, you know what? Many people can lay down and do it, but I know that those of us who took an oath, that oath goes to the grave with us.
Isn't it ironic
that
our veterans go and fight wars, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and Desert Storm, and what have you. And then when they come home, we celebrate, okay? But these guys are over there fighting terrorists, right? And then they come back and what are they called? Terrorists? No, we're not going to accept that, okay? Okay.
Veterans for Peace, of which I am an associate member, and Ed here founded the local VFP Chapter 151? 141. 141.
Good deal.
Veterans for Peace is on the list. They're considered terrorists.
Yeah.
If you're a veteran who supports war, then you'll probably get taken off that list. I understand we're on the list.
Excuse me, may I say something? To make it clear, we are not revolutionaries. We don't want a revolution. We want law and order. The revolution has been going on for years now. They've been taking our Constitution away from us. Those are the revolutionaries, and those would be the terrorists.
Right?
Any other questions?
I'd like to ask, do you think that when someone reaches 40, they should be banned from holding public office?
How many do you have? Go ahead.
Is this not just a tool for them to target people they don't want, they're
opposed to them. Anyone that questions the government in any way,
so
shape,
then,
or form.
Well,
then how could it be used with two-party system?
And you think about it, because it's on the president's authority alone. He can delegate to anyone in the president's cabinet, anyone in the Department of Defense. And so, what can happen is, let's say you're not anti-government, Let's say you are not for constitutional government. Let's say you actually like this law. But what you do is you happen to have loud dogs in your backyard, and you live right next to a good friend of the president's cabinet, and then you make him angry. He uses the NDAA and detains you anyway. It can be used by anyone in that fashion, so it doesn't matter which party's in power. It just, the president picks a person, they carry out the order. And they can pick a person to have discretion over what order they carry out.
Plus, the enemy of the two-party system is oftentimes the same enemy as both of both parties. So it could work in a two-party system because both parties have the same enemies because they have a lot of the same interests, unfortunately.
The one-party system.
When are we going to get two parties?
This young lady in front of me has asked twice now to speak. Will somebody let her speak? You.
Okay. Well, it's not so much of a question as a comment. It's also involving, I don't know if you guys heard about the recent farm bill, it was a couple years ago, that the government is now authorized to go into any farm set and seize property or...
That's the National Defense Resource Preparedness Act. That's part of it as well.
Yeah.
It's the little brother to NDAA.
I think it's kind of a line of events that, you know, you guys keep talking about the line in the sand, it really is.
You're talking about like someone who has raw milk,
Yeah.
gets raided.
Yeah. Is that line in the sand really good? Because it's coming down to local and federal.
And that's happened too. That's happened.
Yeah, it's happened multiple times, especially in California.
We're going to take one more question and we'll get to Rick. You have to-
I'll be more than happy to answer. any
Somebody
questions.
has to ask the question.
But you were going to ask a question?
Well, I have two. The original question was, if you have information for the people who should be contacting, the most effective people, like, for instance, should we write to DeFazio, that kind of thing, where would you direct it? I know you said Wyden and Merkley have already been positive, so that was part one of the question.
Berkeley, Wyden, and DeFazio.
The second part of the question goes to what she said, because I have been taking from this, and I, you know, it's the clip with the TSA. I had a really hard time getting out of Las Vegas because I have a mental leg. And on the flight we were on, I mean, this seems to come down to each little individual thing that you would ever think of. There was a girl ahead of me boarded the plane, and she was sneezing, and she mentioned she wasn't feeling well, and they came on and told her she couldn't be on the plane, and she said, well, she had allergies, but she wasn't sick. And they dragged her and her friend and their child off the plane, kicking and screaming, and then they were told that they would be held for 2 hours and then be allowed another flight. Which makes no sense, because if you were contaminating the plane, why put them on another one? There was obviously no reason to remove this woman from the plane. And she'd been allowed to board and was seated in the seat ahead of me. Somehow these things are all tied. How are they allowed and how are they disallowed, and what can we do about it when it happens to us?
Pandas. It is war, but PANDA, and I can just speak for my organization, I can't necessarily speak for Roadkeepers, but PANDA's specific line in the sand is, and we work, we have been working very closely. Anyone familiar with Restore the Fourth?
What?
Restore the Fourth. A couple of people, okay. They held the biggest protest against NSA spying since the Patriot Act on July 4th, 20,000 people. And they're a group of people who met, young people who met on Reddit, 18, 19, 17 years old, got together and put this together. They are focusing on like TSA searches, and you talk a little about the raw milk thing. And I hate to put our line this far back, but there's so much stuff to take on. PANDA's line in the sand is when the TSA agents who are detaining you start carrying weapons and reporting to a general. That our line in the sand is military, when it goes from civil to military. And I hate we have to draw such a far back line in the sand. I wish we could draw it at stop at my Constitution. But I think the final barrier is when you go from civil to military. And so that's where PANDA's line in the sand is. I wish we could take on the TSA. I hope there are other organizations who come along who specifically take on single issues like we do. But our organization is that line between civil and military.
And TSA is under the direction of the Department of Homeland Security. And so that's part of the problem right there. Mary?
So what do you recommend we all do? We could all contact our commissioners and civil disobedience.
I am all for civil disobedience and belligerence. They call it belligerence, I call it veracity. All right, they call it arrogance, I call it self-confidence. You know what I mean? So they can put any damn name they want. That's the double speak they use. The fact is that we want to do something here locally, then let's do something here locally. I need every one of you to call the two commissioners, Melissa Cribbins and John Sweet, and demand them to vote for this law on this resolution against the NDAA on July 30th. That is the meeting. Better yet, I need you all to show up. And I need you all to show up for the meeting and to speak. And I'll tell you this right now, if you do not speak, as someone who goes back over those minutes of the meeting, if you do not speak, don't even bother showing up because your voice has not been heard. You're not put on public document. Once you've been filmed, once you've been put on the document, your voice has been heard, it's been documented. We need people to speak at that meeting on the 30th. We need you to, and that is at 9:30 a.m. in the morning. I know it's a tough one, so get there about 15 minutes early to sign up to speak, and we should be on the agenda. We're going to ask Bob to put us on the agenda. We're going to demand a vote. Now here's where we're going to need your help if the commissioners don't vote for this. And we're really hoping they're going to have one of those come to Jesus moments. Oh, Lord, I'm healed, hallelujah. And, all of a sudden they see the light and they vote for a resolution. Well, if this doesn't happen, we are going to start the initiative process, and we're going to need everyone in here to help us collect signatures. How many in here would help us collect signatures if we needed to be? All right, right there, we got about 20, 30 people here. That's, we only need 2,500 signatures. It's not a lot to do. And I'll tell you what, I just ran a referendum in Bandon, and we had the highest turnout for that vote. 56% of the people turned out for the special district election, or I should say 52%, and 56% of the people voted against the law that the city council had passed. We can stop this. We control it. In fact, when I presented this to Roger Craddock, who's the manager of Coos Bay, he said to me, and this was his answer, and I use it loosely, was that we don't normally entertain things that aren't in our purview, and this law isn't in our purview. And I wrote back, excuse me, sir, we the people will tell you what you will and will not entertain. And we will tell you what's in your purview. Roger needs to hear that from all of us. So after we go on the 30th to the Board of Commissioners, and we plan on getting that vote, the next day, if we don't have it, we're going to start that initiative process, and you can leave your name over here because we're going to share the information. PANDA, Coos County Watchdog, we'll get in contact with you. It's easy to send you over email. Get this, over email, we can send you a petition signature sheet, and you can go out and get 10 and mail it back to me. This is not a hard process. We can do it, and we can rub it in the nose of the face of the commissioners who decide not to enforce our constitutional rights. And so that is what we can do here. And if you can go ahead, if you live in Coos Bay, give the Coos Bay City Council a call and let them know that they need to pass the same resolution. And those are two things you can do. And once again, if you go to CoosCountyWatchdog.com, you can sign up for the newsletter, and whether you agree with the issues that we're doing or not, at least you will be informed. And I thank you very much, and I want to turn it back over to Tom and Dan.
I got one quick thing. I know you guys have been here for a while, and I thank you guys for sitting here and listening to me and listening to, I sincerely hope I was able to make an impact. I'm glad to see people as young as I am, or somewhere around that age in the audience. As a quick favor to me, something that really helps rally the PANDA troops, as it were, around the country is seeing a type of unity. So Tom's going to have the retaking of the oath ceremony. If you guys could just stick around and we could do one quick group picture in front of, for anybody who's willing, in front of this screen, I can send that out to my PANDA teams and they can see success. Because you talk about hope, and hope is what keeps people going, just a sliver of hope, and just seeing a little white petal on that flower.
is enough. And if you guys would, and anybody would be willing to stay and do me that personal favor, so that after we do the oath of retaking, we can do a group picture. I can send it out to our teams across the country. That would be much appreciated.
Put the mic down again. Here we go. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to mention one thing before we get into this. You know, when they talk about enemy combatants and aiding and that enemy to make them comfortable to, you know, would that include arming terrorists or equipment? What do you think? Yeah. Yeah, you would? Okay. Syria. We have Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood. Are those terrorists? Yeah. Then why are we supplying them? Who in our government do you believe would qualify to be an enemy combatant about the NDAA? Who?
Obama
administration. Don't you agree that they would fit the category of that more so than we would? How many of us has $60 million to send out to another foreign country? Okay, none of us are supplying a foreign aid to a terrorist organization, but we're the ones who are going to be getting the hell kicked out of us for, okay? If anyone would like to renew their oath or at this time take the oath again, I'd ask you to stand and raise your right hand and repeat after me. Now, I want you to remember something. Don't take this oath unless you mean it, unless you'll stand by it for the rest of your life. Now, do you realize that our ancestors would be spinning in their graves right now? They'd come out shooting, and then they get back in their graves, disgusted. So we're not going to allow that to happen. After I say aye, then you'll state your name. Aye.
Aye.
Do solemnly swear or affirm.
Do solemnly swear or affirm.
That I will support and defend the Constitution.
That I will support and defend the Constitution
of the United States of America.
Of the United States of America.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
And that I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Pledging my life.
Pledging my life.
My fortune.
My fortune.
And my sacred honor.
And my sacred honor.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Welcome, fellow oath keepers. Remember one thing. I want you to do this. The ones who are taking the oath for the first time, I want you to pick up one of these pamphlets over here on the table. And if you join Oath Keepers, you're going to need that date that it has on the form, and that's when you took the oath. And that will be today, the 15th. So help yourself with that and join our organization. We could use you. And thank you for that. It's over.
Are we going to grab a group picture? You got a cell phone, right?
Yeah, I do. Can we get a group picture?
Hey, guys.
Where you want?
Oh, I could help you. Good. Where, what's
We want to take a group picture, everybody. Let's all get up here for a group picture, okay? Everybody.
One day, somebody's going to have to say enough.